This is Jonathan Martin at Politico with the advice for President Biden on how he can turn this around, saying it will be an extraordinary election and it demands extraordinary measures. That's in part for reasons Biden refuses to accept: his capacity to do the job. The oldest president in history, when he first took the oath, Biden will not be able to govern and campaign in the manner of previous incumbents. He simply does not have the capacity to do it. And his staff does not trust him to even try, as they make clear by blocking him from the press. Biden's bid will give new meaning to a Rose Garden campaign, and it requires accommodation to that unavoidable fact of life. In response to which, Charles C.W. Cook of National Review writes, "I must stop Martin right here. This is not extraordinary. It is disqualifying." He does not have the capacity to run or govern as a normal man. They're giving it up. I guess in any other sane world, they'd be saying, you really need to step aside, but the fear is so great of what will happen with Trump. I don't know. What are the Democrats thinking? That Biden's their man, notwithstanding all these swing state polls? Why is Jonathan Martin trying to save him?
I mean, what you have to love is the point that you just pointed out, which is like, oh man, we got a candidate. He actually can't speak. He's like a Roomba in a room. When he gets out of it, he doesn't know up from down. We only get about half an hour of good time. How are we going to reelect him?
Yeah.
How are we going to make sure that this guy serves the American people?
It's
We're going to have to be innovative.
They're like, well, we have to make sure that the American people don't realize he's incapable of performing the job. That's how we're going to run this.
Going to band together. Yeah. Well, you guys talk about how he's like the Roomba in bumping into the walls and the legs of the chairs, you said. And it's true. And we saw that when he was trying, all he had to do was go to the wreath laying ceremony at Arlington the other day. It's like every president does it. Just go up there, you do it, and then you leave. He couldn't even do that. Look at this. He doesn't know where to go. He stutter steps, turns around. Nope, back over here, sir. Over here. All I can think of is, again, back and forth. All I can think of is my cousin Vinny. Over here, dear. Over here.
Yeah, but to the point you made earlier, Megyn, I think the only thing keeping him in this race and keeping Democrats hopeful that they have some shot to pull an inside straight here and reelect Joe Biden is Donald Trump's up by 40 points in the Republican primary. And, him being there, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, is, I think, the only thing keeping Biden in this race, because Democrats think they still have a shot.
Didn't they look at those polls I just mentioned?
Yeah, but I think they look at everything coming off their side of the ledger, whether it's black men, right, or black voters or Hispanic voters, and they think we can bring those people home if Donald Trump's the nominee. That it's just like a lack of enthusiasm for their choice in the Democratic primary. They don't have one, and so they're expressing their displeasure in the polling and saying, I'm not going to support Joe Biden. But if you look at the rest of the polling there, when they test generic Republican or Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis, they're winning too. In fact, generic Republican leads Biden in all of those swing states.
He's the big winner.
15 points. 15 points.
We got to get that guy.
Yeah.
Generic
Who is
Republican,
that guy?
It's stout.
Draft generic Republican.
Yeah.
Well, of course, but it's all, of course, a farce, because there is no such thing or person. And once a real person steps into the suit of generic Republican, he or she has problems and inconsistencies in their past, and those numbers come down. So it's fine to sort of say generic Republican, but there's got to be a body. I mean, I feel like Mitt Romney was as generic a Republican back then, not today, as you could get. And he lost.
Brutal but accurate.
No,
Right?
it's very true. But I think the point of Jonathan Martin's piece, which I'm glad other people are picking up on at this point, is when you're running a campaign, every single person of any sort of consequence has moments of high negatives across the board. And then you got to look at, your policy matrix, and you got to look at your candidate, and you have to figure out a game plan to try to win people back over. I mean, I'll remind people of 2012, when you looked at Barack Obama, his numbers were not dissimilar from where Joe Biden's are now. They were very, very tough. But Barack Obama, you knew you could barnstorm the country, and he was a pretty compelling speaker, and he could make the case to the American people that he deserved re-election. With Joe Biden, what Democrats are doing is looking at this and being like, well, whatever hole he's dug for himself, there's no chance that he can dig himself back out of it. So literally the only thing we can do at this point is try to draw the Republican down to where Biden is. And I think to Michael's point, they see that with Trump right away. And they think that almost no matter what, they could run a cadaver against Donald Trump and have an even odds shot at winning. So I think that's the calculus. I think that's what was captured in that Politico piece.
Well, and at the very least, this might be the first election in history for president where the party out of power, the candidate out of power, the election is a referendum on them, because Donald Trump is going to spend the whole next year battling these various court cases. And so, like, in a weird way, it's kind of like 2020 and Biden's basement campaign. It's like, actually let Donald Trump suck up all the oxygen, because all that oxygen ends up being negative for him.
He doesn't think so. Did you guys see he went into the Georgia trial is going to be televised because it's a state case in Georgia and they allow cameras in the courtroom, but federal trials are not televised. They don't allow cameras in for federal courts. And he went into that DC courtroom with that judge who can't stand him, Tanya Chutkan, in the Jack Smith case on January 6th. And Trump is asking for cameras in the courtroom, which I predict will be denied, as it would be by virtually any federal court judge. But he's asking for cameras there. He definitely thinks the trials, the persecution is helping him. And so far, he's been proven right on that.
Well, I mean, look, what he does best is put on a show. That's what he's done best for 50 years, is put on a show. And, you know, I mean, he's had the number one show on television. I would argue for the last 6 years, he's had the number one show on television still, right? It's just everyone's channel. So, of course, he wants to do this. He wants to make a big show out of all of it. I don't think it's going to help him in a lot of these cases, however, because look, they're court reporters. You're going to get an even readout of what's happening there, even from the conservative side of the ledger. It's tough. I mean, there's not a lot he can do but try to make it a show. In particular, as Duncan always talks about, that documents case, which I think is the one that's the toughest for him.
And in that poll that we were talking about earlier, they asked if Donald Trump is convicted of one of these cases, does that change your opinion of him? It's a 20-point swing against Donald Trump with independent voters, a general election audience. So yeah, I mean, clearly it's helped him a lot to be the guy fighting in this primary. It's helped all of his poll numbers, but it's a general election suicide.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's incredibly important to reiterate that point, is that independent voters are incredibly shaky on Donald Trump. If he's so much as, I mean, there's 50 charges, 70 charges that he's facing right now?
91.
92. Yeah. 92 counts.
If he's convicted as so much as one of them, independent voters are gone and the election's lost.
Well, because he's just going to say, I mean, the Dems are going to say convicted felon, convicted felon, convicted felon. And Biden's going to say, I'm not debating a convicted felon. Hell no. I'm going to stay in my basement or the Rose Garden, what have you. And it's definitely a plus, but I don't know. Everything in the criminal lane has helped Donald Trump so far. You know, Molly Hemingway over at The Federalist posted this graph of what happened the day Alvin Bragg indicted him. That was the first one in New York. And it was just, whoosh, you know, he and DeSantis were like this, with Trump a bit above DeSantis, but it was still, you know, it was a ball game. And I mean, as of that day, whoosh, Trump went off the map, Biden started going down, and those two trajectories have never changed since. But wait, I'll get to more of that in 1 second. I just want to stay on the political piece for one more minute, because I love this. I love this piece of it. So this is why we need more people who are right-leaning to write pieces in places like Politico, because, okay, I think most of us, Dem, Republican, Independent, can agree on what he's saying here about how Biden does not have the capacity, okay? But then they get to the solutions. This is him advising Biden. I spoke with dozens of Democrats and anti-Trump Republicans about what the president can do to improve his prospects. The level of despair was striking. Here's a sample of what Biden can do. Okay, number one, get Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney must be deployed and do all she can to bring other prominent figures with her, including Dick Cheney, her father, and former President George W. Bush. Liz Cheney is the answer to their problem. That's solution number one they have here. Number two, Rahm Emanuel. Bring him back. He's Biden's envoy to Japan. He needs to come back and chair the re-election. As for the Mideast, you have to bring in Bill and Hillary Clinton, because Biden cannot handle it all. And the last two I actually agree with. heave Bidenomics into the dumpster, correct, and talk about abortion every day. Those two things will help them. But what do you make of the Liz Cheney rescue plan?
Does that work, Johnny?
I'm not buying it. I mean, I mean, just to put it bluntly, if his plan is to call Liz Cheney and then call the Clintons, I really think that Joe Biden has a tougher road to reelection, even against Donald Trump. He has a tougher road to reelection than these early polls suggest about what happens if Donald Trump is actually convicted. People are fed up with Biden. They're fed up with the economy. They're fed up with what they're seeing on a global stage, and they want something different. And this could be a different election than we've seen in a long time, with new candidates injected into the conversation. There's RFK. How many states is he going to be on the ballot? Will that have an impact? Would Joe Manchin be on a ballot? Will that have an impact? I mean, we could see a very different cycle this year than we've ever seen before, simply because people are so dissatisfied left, right, and center with Joe Biden.
Debt. You can go to bed thinking about it and wake up thinking about it still. High interest credit cards and loans make it nearly impossible to pay off your debt. And insane inflation keeps you stuck paycheck to paycheck. The system traps you in debt. Well, donewithdebt.com can be a lifeline. I've talked about my own experience with debt back when I was in law school in the past. It's stressful. Donewithdebt.com has a new strategy to help erase your debt faster and easier than you ever thought possible. And here's what they can do for you. Analyze all the debt options you qualify for, minimize interest rates, cut medical bills, and reduce debt without bankruptcy and without a loan. But you do need to hurry. Some debt solutions are time sensitive. Go to donewithdebt.com. Find out how easy they make it and find out if it's right for you. That's donewithdebt.com, donewithdebt.com. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.